Way Station by Clifford Simak, published in 1963, is a book that was originally published in two parts under the title of Here Gather the Stars in Galaxy magazine, which actually went on to win the Hugo Award for Best Novel in 1964. Simak is an author who has been hit or miss for me personally, but a lot of people will point to it as one of his better novels, so I am looking forward to giving this one a try. Which I'll have to do actually, because it is part of a reading challenge that I am doing on the channel, which is to read all of science fiction, the 100 best novels list by David Pringle, and the next few books are also part of that list, and I'll tell you when we are moving on from those. Next up, I've got Make Room by Harry Harrison, published in 1966, and I've not read any Harrison before outside of maybe a couple of his short stories, but this is his overpopulation novel, which was supposedly the basis for the 1973 film Soylent Green, which I've never seen, but it's supposedly quite different from this novel. Overpopulation was clearly a hot topic for science fiction writers around this time period, with things like John Brunner's Stand on Zanzibar coming out just 2 years after this, and then things like The World Inside by Robert Silverberg coming out just a couple of years after that. Then we've got Camp Concentration by Thomas M. Dish, published in 1968, which is written as a diary from a defector in a future war, where a strain of syphilis is being used in an experiment to elevate human intelligence. This is another one that was originally serialized in New Worlds magazine, and it is supposedly a quintessential new wave SF novel. I haven't read anything by Thomas M. Dish just yet, and I've found his books incredibly difficult to come across here in England. But those three initial books were very thoughtful Christmas gifts from my girlfriend, which means that I have nearly finished my collection from this list, and I think there are only 5 or 6 that I don't own a physical copy of at this point. I also got some vouchers from my family, and I decided to buy some newer editions, so I also picked up The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury, yet another fix-up novel, this one published in 1950, which seems to be a series of interconnected short stories focused on the human colonization of Mars following a nuclear war on Earth, which leads to interactions with the indigenous Martian people. I've read and enjoyed Bradbury before, albeit outside of his SF work, so hopefully this one also hits for me. While we're on the topic of Bradbury, I also picked up a copy of Fahrenheit 451, his 1953 dystopian classic, which is set in a society where books have been outlawed and are being systematically burned, which is obviously dealing with censorship, freedom of speech, and the suppression of divergent ideologies in the wake of World War II. This is a really highly regarded novel that has been on my list of shame for some time now. And I know that a lot of people probably read this in school or college or something, which is not an experience that I personally had. Here we've got Nova Express by William S. Burroughs, published in 1964, which is supposedly an experimental and surreal novel focused on a gang of criminals who are seeking ultimate control. It's said to be written in a cut-up style, where the text has been broken up and rearranged into a non-linear order. And this is often said to be part of a sort of stylistic, thematic trilogy alongside The Soft Machine and The Ticket That Exploded. I've got the feeling that this one will be a challenging read, so we'll see how I get on with it. Crash by J.G. Ballard is a 1973 novel that I've been really intrigued by for quite some time, and now that it's part of my reading challenge, I finally have an excuse to dive in. It follows a group of people who fetishize car crashes, deriving sexual gratification from staging, participating in, or witnessing them. I've seen the film adaptation, but I have read and loved other Ballard books in the past, so I think that I'll probably get more out of this version of the narrative. Is it really science fiction? I guess that depends on where you draw your own personal boundaries, so I'll see how I feel. And that concludes all of the books that are part of Science Fiction, the 100 Best Novels list by David Pringle. So we'll move on to a number of books that I found in various shops between Essex, Kent and London. Starting with Extro by Alfred Bester, published in 1975, which was also widely published under the title The Computer Connection, which is about immortality, specifically focused on one character who grants immortality to people that he deems to be worthy by murdering them in gruesome ways. Because supposedly the individual needs to feel certain that they are going to die before being saved at the very last minute in order for them to achieve this immortal state. It doesn't seem as widely read or as highly regarded as Bester's other works, such as The Star's My Destination or The Demolished Man, but I think that he is a great author and someone whose influence I can really feel bleeding throughout the genre. The plot sounds great to me, so I'll probably pick it up at some point after I've finished my reading challenge. We've then got Rorke by Avram Davidson, published in 1965, which seems to be about a planet inhabited by giant, nightmarish talking spider beasts called the Rorks, which are the source of a medicine that humanity desperately need. I confess that I don't really know all that much about Davidson, and it does seem that his work has faded into obscurity somewhat, but if I ever do come to review this, I will do some proper research into the author. Brothers of Earth by C.J. Cherryh, published in 1976, is a book that I actually already have a copy of, and one that I've talked about in a previous book haul video, so I won't say too much about it here, other than I think it's her second published novel, and I really couldn't resist grabbing this copy of it when I came across it in person because I absolutely love this piece of cover art, which I think is by an artist called David Fairbrother Rowe. We've then got Nine Princes in Amber by Roger Zelazny from 1970, which is the first book in his fantasy series, The Chronicles of Amber, which seems to follow a man on Earth who discovers that he is actually a prince of a parallel world, I think, called Amber, and he is one of 9 men who could potentially go on to rule it. While we're on fantasy, I picked up a copy of A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin from 1968, and she is an author who has become one of my favourites, but I've only read her science fiction work, and I know that a few people have been wanting me to read and review some fantasy on the channel, so this might be a nice way to ease into it, since I believed it is aimed at a younger audience. But Le Guin is a great author, so I'm sure that I would enjoy it regardless. It follows a boy at a school of wizardry who accidentally unleashes a shadow creature that he then needs to get rid of somehow. We'll stick with fantasy for a minute more because I found a copy of Elric of Menibene by Michael Moorcock, published in 1972, which follows an emperor of a dying island civilization who wields a cursed sword that consumes souls, which sounds incredible to me. And this is the first book in a series of novels which have some fantastic cover art, including this one here from Julek Heller. Speaking of cool cover art, we have The Island of Dr. Death and Other Stories by Gene Wolfe, which is an amazing title from 1980. 1980, and this is a collection of his science fiction and fantasy short stories. And I don't know much about the stories in here, but after The Fifth Head of Cerberus by Gene Wolfe became my favourite science fiction novel that I read last year, I just had to get my hands on some more of his work. Dinosaur Beach by Keith Lormer from 1971 is a book that follows time-travelling secret agents who end up in the Jurassic Age, which sounds terrible, but I've actually heard quite a few good things about it from people here on YouTube, so we'll see how it ends up being. Shadows of the White Sun by Raymond Harris, published in 1988, is a book that I can't find too much information on outside of a synopsis that suggests that it's about a race of android beings who were created by computers who are now living on a desert planet. The cover is definitely making me wonder whether it is a shameless Dune ripoff, but let me know if you know anything about Raymond Harris or anything about Shadows of the White Sun, because at the time of recording it only has 16 ratings on Goodreads, so it might be an interesting forgotten title to uncover. The Solarians by Norman Spinrad, published in 1966, is about a race of aliens who have exiled themselves from the galaxy with the promise that they will one day return to bring humanity to glory. And Spinrad is an author who seems to get quite a bit of praise, with the books that I see coming up the most often being The Iron Dream, which I do own a copy of somewhere, and Bug-Jack Barron, which is actually part of my reading challenge, and I own a copy of that one as well. I haven't read him yet, but I do think I'll start with Bug-Jack Barron because it is part of Science Fiction, the 100 Best Novels, and we'll see whether I want to continue reading any of his work from there. Decision at Doha by Anne McCaffrey, published in 1969, is set in a world where humanity have encountered an alien race who went on to commit mass suicide as a result of that interaction, which means that humanity outlawed first contact with any other sentient creatures. And this book follows a colonization mission to a seemingly uninhabited world, which turns out to be the home of a race of cat-like alien beings. And I don't know what it is with science fiction authors and cat-like aliens. It seems to pop up time and time again. But McCaffrey is most well known for her Dragon Riders of Pern series. And I have read Dragonflight, the first book in that series, and enjoyed it, but I'm not sure if I'm racing to get back to reading McCaffrey with any sense of urgency. So do let me know if you think it's worth reading Decision at Doha if you've read it yourself. The Electric Crocodile by D.G. Compton, published in 1970, is a book where I've read the synopsis and I must admit I don't really understand what the premise is here. But I have read great things about Compton as a writer, primarily about The Continuous Catherine Mortenhoe and Farewell Earth's Bliss, so I'd like to try his stuff at some point. The Deep by John Crowley, published in 1975, is a book that I picked up because I loved Engine Summer and then went on to read Beasts, and I liked that one too. This one seems to follow an inhuman artificial visitor to what is a medieval world, where two factions called the Reds and the Blacks are locked in a war. This is actually Crowley's debut novel, and I always think it's interesting to read an author's early work, and this is one that I am definitely really intrigued by. Doggerland by Ben Smith, published in 2019, follows an unnamed pair of characters referred to as the boy and the old man, who are working in isolation on the maintenance of an offshore wind farm, where the boy is investigating his father's death or disappearance, and he worked on the wind farm before him. I just like the sound of this one, and while I'm not sure that it's overtly science fiction, it does sound like it's pretty otherworldly in tone. Defiance by C.J. Cherry and Jane Fancher, published in 2023, was a gift from my brother who knows that I like CJ Cherryh, and this one is actually the 22nd book in her popular Foreigner series, which initially chronicles some survivors of a crash on a planet which is inhabited by a hostile alien race. And I don't think that I own any of the other Foreigner books. I've definitely not read any of them. So if I ever do get around to reading this one, it's going to be quite a while yet. I don't often pick up hardbacks or hardcovers, but occasionally I will see one that is the right price. And the last book of this video is At Winter's End by Robert Silverberg, published in 1988. And it follows a civilization who have spent 700,000 years below the Earth's surface, who are finally re-emerging to encounter a new world. If you've watched my channel for a while, you'll know that I love Silverberg, and I'll pretty much read anything by him, including this one, which seems to have fairly mixed reviews. And I have to show you the portrait of Robert Silverberg on the back of the book here to end this book haul. So that's everything that I bought or received recently. Have you read any of them? Do any of them sound intriguing to you? And where should I start with picking some of these up? Thanks again for watching, liking, and subscribing, and I'll see you on the next one.